That's kind of what my couple of weeks been like. Everybody, this is Val Campbell and my best buddy Brad.
I'm gonna get my figure. That's what it says right there. That's my name, Brad. Welcome, guys. Glad to be here Saturday morning. Fired up are you?
I haven't figured out yet how to hack that thing and put in John Jacob Jingleheimer Schmidt, but
should we sing that?
Most people wouldn't even know what
Jacob,
that is.
Schmidt, that's my name too.
You know, I can remember when I was a little kid, my sister.
Not a great vocalist here, but I'm sitting with the to be a future acclaimed novelist, Val Campbell. We'll get into that
I think
another time. But
I don't know. That's strange. But yeah, I've had a lot of fun with that. If anybody's tuning in, what Brad's talking about is that I'm finishing up kind of the last stages of a spy thriller novel that's based on real life events and real life people, oddly, strangely, weirdly enough, that I've actually met, and some of them, one of them I've known for 40 years, and his life is like. Did you ever see that movie Get Carter? It was a Stallone movie.
I don't know if I've actually seen that one. That name sounds familiar, but I probably haven't.
It's a fantastic movie. It's about a guy that was let's just say he was a debt collector for the casinos. All right, and that was what John did. That was one of his career moves, and we're talking some.
Muscle man for the loan sharks, right?
Well, the casinos, and these high rollers go in there, and the drug guys and all kinds of stuff, and they're not carrying cash in and buying chips,
Right.
They're sorry, everybody, we're kind of digressing here a little bit from some of the stuff, but
we're talking about important stuff. We're going to get into the unimportant stuff here shortly.
Oh, anyway, but the truth is, these guys go in, they're not carrying cash in and buying chips, they're just signing for stuff. They just sign, and some of these guys will rack up hundreds of thousands of dollars in loss, maybe millions in some cases. And the casinos, if they know who these people are, right? They'll let them roll, and it's up to those people. And some of these people are seriously bad folks. I mean, we're talking like some of the worst degenerates there are, and they're down there high rolling in Las Vegas, and if they get on a losing streak, they're not good. And then sometimes stuff happens, and these guys go collect what they can, and there's some ugly stories. But anyway, I've heard some of these things from my buddy, and talked about some of this stuff, and of course, then in the process of that, he knows. Some of the world's elite black ops people. And because they train together and stuff like that, these places out in the country where they set these places up where they can go train and practice their gunfighting and stuff like that. And you laugh, gunfighting, you're thinking about the OK Corral, but these guys are gunfight specialists. I mean, they're really, really, really primo. And a lot of them are ex-Rangers, ex-SEALs, stuff like that. So anyway, it's a strange world we live in, and a lot of this stuff actually happens. And you and I are going to talk about some of that kind of stuff a little bit today.
I was going to say, hey man, guys, thanks for joining us, guys. That was a great show, man. We're going to catch you next week.
Well, I think it's interesting that you and I started this conversation. And we started this discussion. I decided to share with you that you wasn't particularly trying to keep it quiet, but I didn't want to really come out with a bunch of announcements until I got closer, and I've really been busy. But talking about the world of subterfuge, the world of spying, and I think a lot of people have a general awareness that this exists. If you were to ask people, they'd go, oh, yeah, it exists. But I don't think people really understand a lot about how much of it there is and how prominent it is.
Well, we were just talking about her, but Kathy's son is a black ops operative for the U.S. government.
Yeah.
I mean, serious. They had the guys in the black Suburbans over telling them, hey, when he's home, your house is going to be bugged. If something happens to him, it's just going to be an accident and see. But he's involved in some serious covert stuff.
And one of the reasons that I started chatting with you a little bit about this before we came on the air is that some of this stuff is coming to light more than in the past. And I want to share a couple of ideas about that. And I'm interested in obviously getting your input. But first, during the Obama administration, the advent of technology makes it more and more difficult for these black ops, at least the government people, to keep this under wraps. It makes it hard for them to wash the funding through congressional stuff because there's so much communication, there's so much exposure. And there's two things that they do. First off, the CIA is the biggest drug and I say biggest, I don't know, but they're biggest drug and gun running organization in the world, one of. Okay. And they started this in the Vietnam War. And it was a way that they could create massive amounts of cash to then fund some of their black ops stuff. Yeah. So here you've got the CIA, the Department of Justice in some cases, running drugs and guns to pay for law enforcement that they can't legitimately wash through government books. Now, is this weird?
No, and I'll tell you why it's not weird. I'm old enough to remember Daniel Ellsberg and the infamous Pentagon Papers. So, folks, our government hasn't and doesn't tell us the whole truth and nothing but the truth quite often. I read a book last year. In fact, it's on my shelf here. J. Edgar Hoover. J. Edgar Hoover had an enormous amount of power, which is why he was able to stay as FBI director for basically 50 years through 1972. It wasn't until he died that he left office. The guy, because he had, we'll call it the goods or dirt on politicians, justices, presidents, you name it. So interestingly, now I'm reading an excellent book written by a guy who's now Harvard law professor, Jack Goldstein, whose stepfather was Chucky O'Brien, who was the right-hand man to Hoffa. Interesting. He was also an attorney at the Justice Department. Now, this comes full circle because not only did Hoover subvert what Supreme Court rulings were in regards to eavesdropping, wiretapping, and all that. So the Supreme Court said you can't do this, Fourth Amendment, all that. Well, Hoover would go to the AG and, hey, we need this. It's national security. We're going to do it, right? And they did it. Boom. This is a lot of stuff what happened with Hoffa and especially Bobby Kennedy. I'll just say Bobby Kennedy does not come off as a really good guy. He had a vendetta against Hoffa, and he will just be generous. He stretched the law quite a bit in his vendetta to go after Hoffa. So government's doing stuff that the law says you can't or whatever. It's not new news. It happens. We just don't hear about it till here we are 50 years later. And this guy was interviewing his stepfather, got all this, but he's also an attorney. He also worked at the Justice Department, came across documents that supported what he said. And you're going, okay, so these people that have a lot of power can do a lot of things and they can keep a lot of things quiet. But like you're saying, Val, I'll just say it's harder to hide with the internet now. It's really hard to hide. I mean,
in the process of doing some very, very, very nerdy research.
Val, are you a nerd?
I am nerd. I say, I'm not a geek, but I'm a real nerd.
I'm shocked to hear that. That's
a nerd. So in the process of doing some of this research into some, technical stuff that's way deeper than I normally would get into, it's incredible the stuff that you can come up with, the intel. There's places where you can go and read research publications on all kinds of things that you'd go, gee, how do they get away with publishing or writing some of this stuff? But it's out there, some of it.
Yep.
And I've had my personal experiences. You probably know is that I was a consultant for many years, and a lot of my consulting was on behalf of governments, specific to building codes and fire and life safety codes.
Mm-hmm.
And in that capacity, construction being such big money, there's a lot of graft and corruption involved in it. A lot of bribery, a lot of fraud
on that one.
A lot of fraud. Yeah. And so I won't go through the whole discussions of that, but it causes some huge issues with schools and hospitals and infrastructures and things like that, because in like practically every single situation, every company, these big construction companies, every one of them that I was ever around, without exception, name the big construction company, they were doing it, and I believe still are. I don't see any reason why they would. They're defrauding the government. They're cheating on construction and in pocketing the money.
It's easy to do with the government, and sadly, I won't say it's like butter, but it's easy enough to do that.
And it's like anything else. You have these group of people that are subject matter experts, and the people on the other side of the table really aren't. And so
you could be talking about almost every politician.
Yeah, it's really true. But you look at it this way. Just think about it this way. Mm-hmm. Hospitals and schools, they aren't construction people. They're more medical administration and education administration. Now you got a contractor here whose people are deeply, deeply subject matter experts into specifications and how, so now they're interacting with people who are not on equal footing. Now these guys have started hiring a construction management firm sometimes to do that, but they can't keep up. The data is too massive. So anyway, not to get too deep down that rabbit hole, but the idea in the corruption that I ran into on the part of government would be the term replete. It was everything and everywhere. There was no element. Hey, Deacon Jerry, how you doing, buddy?
Hey, Jerry, thanks for joining us, man. Good to see you today.
There was no place in government, not one single place in government that we touched in 7 to 10 years that wasn't dirty. And just one example, I think maybe the worst example that I personally was there was that the Washington State Attorney General's office had done an investigation of 8 schools, found thousands upon thousands upon thousands. One school had 8,000 code violations.
I'm shocked.
And this was a preliminary investigation that they had funding to do because of the failure of one of these buildings. And there were others. There were other schools that completely failed. And they went to the legislature, presented their findings, and asked for more appropriations to expand the investigation statewide and prosecute the criminals that were involved. The criminals, the general contractors, went to Olympia and passed a lot of campaign money around and bought off the legislature that pulled the funding from the entire investigation and shut it down. And I was there. I was there. And that and a number of other situations they saw, and there were a group of us, and we just walked away. We just came to the deep understanding by being there face to face that the system is broken and it can't be fixed because the people running the system don't want to fix it. They're making money from this.
Yeah.
And then you come to the sad, cynical realization that there's a separation between the concept of America and the reality of the government. It's not the same. So when you see people out there waving flags and being patriotic, the sad reality is that they're talking about the concept, but the reality is this is a criminal organization that's just figured out a way to legitimize their crime and make it legal.
And that leads me to maybe an obvious segue. Did Joe Biden's son do what he did, and did Joe Biden know about it? My vote's going to be yes. You're telling me 47 years in office. I just go, that to me almost equals corruption. You're a part of the I'll just say, if nothing else, you're part of the problem. You're no part of any solution, Joe.
You know, I'm going to make a statement, and I thought about this a lot this week because it's inflammatory. It seems biased, whatever. And people say, well, why would that be? Well, because of my face-to-face experience in 7 Western states and in dealing with the federal government also.
Yep.
Now, I'm not going to tell you that there is no corruption on the Republican side. I can't.
No, that'd be blind. You're blind.
I can't attest to that.
Yeah.
What I can tell you is, in my experience, 10 years, full-time consulting, investigating involvement in 7 Western states. That includes California, Washington, Alaska, Nevada, etc. Every place that I saw corruption involved Democrats. Now, you might say that's because Democrats hold most of the offices. But I just got to ask you, why do they hold most of the offices? And I can tell you in California, because I was deep into it there, it's because the mob is part of it. You can't get the Democratic Party and the mob apart. It's like trying to pull the fingers off your hand and say that there's something left. They're the same.
Yeah,
and
corruption runs deep.
They feed each other. I mean, literally, yeah. I'm talking about Vito Scarpelli, The Sopranos, the guys that just look like The Sopranos. It's incredible how cliche it is.
Yeah,
and they're the ones that are putting Nancy Pelosi and Maxine Waters and Feinstein and those folks. They're the ones that put those guys in office. They're on the East Coast, same thing. They're the ones that put Joe Biden in office. I can tell you, I've been there. I've walked into the restaurant and seen Tony Soprano sitting over there doing business.
Well, this recent book I'm reading is really interesting because of the mob's connections to the Teamsters Union and what Tony Provenzano, Anthony Giacalone. What's interesting, what's coming out, I can see it, is Hoffa didn't have his hands tied to the mob. He used them to build the Teamsters Union, but he held the mob at an arm's length. What happened when he went to prison, Frank Fitzsimmons took over. Frank's like, hey, man, come on. So the mob opened doors, come on in. Here's the money, pension fund trust. We'll loan it out, do whatever you want. So the mob liked Fitzsimmons. This whole time, Hoffa's trying to get back in office. And my guess is, I haven't read the end of the book yet, but the reason he was taken out is because all of a sudden the mob is in control and this guy wants to come back in.
Yeah.
Not going to happen. He started naming names, and you don't do that with the mob. They said when you start doing that, you end up disappeared. So.
Well, the reason that they focused on construction so much is 2 parts. First off, there's tremendous amounts of federal money that gets pumped into construction.
Yeah.
And then they can control multiple sides of this. They can buy property, they can receive funds in construction bids and things. They can use the congressional connections to influence how the appropriations get bought out. Then through the unions, they have this vast amount of dues money that comes through.
Yep.
And they can legitimately, the way this thing works, they can legitimately go back and donate that money back to the politicians. See, it's a little hard for Joe Scarpelli, for Vito Scarpelli to go in there, and it's a little more difficult to just hand Nancy Pelosi a check. Okay. But through the PACs and whatever, the labor unions can contribute to the campaign funds, and the way that they've set up the laws, whatever money you've got left in your war chest gets converted. You can't take it into your own pocket. You can then put it into a foundation that pays you to fly all over the world and do junkets or whatever.
Bill and Hillary Clinton, huh?
And then the other side of this is the politicians, Pelosi, Feinstein, I don't know her so much, Maxine Waters. I don't know the specific people with her, but Pelosi, Maxine Waters, Joe Biden, Harry Reid, these guys, Chuck Schumer, what they do, big time Bernie Sanders. What they do is they put their family members in positions on boards of directors and things like that, where they're being paid, and those banks, those construction companies, those things like that, they get beneficial treatment, and they get award monies on contracts and things, and then some of that gets funneled back through to the family. And so Joe Biden can stand there straight-faced and say, I did not receive $1 from foreign governments. And I have no doubt that he didn't. But Hunter and his brother and all the other people, these people got billions.
Well, you look at some, and I read this, I forget all the details, but like, it still amazes me, Barack Obama going from a quote community organizer, whatever that is, and I think his wife was an attorney at some hospital, someplace, making like $300,000 a year. You go, but how does a newly elected senator buy $1 million home in Chicago? That's still, I was just scratching my head going, how does that? Well, and you just kind of explained it. I'm just going, they got the foundations. Clintons have their foundations, and they're on it. They get paid. Their daughter gets paid. Her and her husband just happened to stumble across this investment that they made $15 million on. I mean, that happens to most Americans, I'm sure.
Well, happened to me last week. Yeah.
50. I turned it down. I said, I don't need 15 million, and just come on. But yeah, you start seeing these connections, but it's just infiltrated. So to think a guy, I'm sorry, if you've been in office 47 years, you're lining your own pockets and your family's pockets. You're not, I'll say probably 40 years ago, you stopped doing any good. Now you stop being part of the solution. You've been part of the problem for 40 plus years.
Most of these people never were, they never were public like servants. They're charismatic opportunists.
Well, look at the Kennedys. I disdain Ted Kennedy. The guy was just whatever, but coming from a filthy rich family, one of the richest families in America, went to Harvard Law School, whatever it was, never had a real job, and he's out doling out legislation. So do good. I think I'm sorry, I'm going to say this, but the best thing that he did for America was pass away. I mean, my goodness, this guy did innumerable damage to our economy, but these people are praised for being just, helping everybody out. And
it drives me crazy. It drives me crazy to watch this process. And it's hard for me to watch some of the political things. Sometimes I have to force myself to do it, but it creates this nausea. I just want to throw up.
I'm going to say this term. I had coffee last week from a good friend of mine from church, who's an attorney by trade. He worked on Dave Reichert's. He was on Dave Reichert's staff for a number of years. Now works for an executive recruiting firm on the East Side. So he's very well informed. And we relate. We're kind of nerdy. He always wants to know what books I'm reading, et cetera. So, but he said this, and this is what I learned back in college in public relations with Dr. John Hipley. It's political theater. He doesn't watch that stuff. I said, I don't either, because I know it's just crafted stuff, and it's theater. It's not serious to me.
The thing that really bugs me,
I have a difficult time taking it too seriously because it's scripted. Like, just we can get into the debates here. I actually watched this one again, I have to say that the people, the corporate media people that mediate these, it just well, it's carefully crafted and scripted for the stupid American people to watch it and lap it up.
The thing that really bugs me about so much of this stuff is some guy dies, John McCain, pick a guy, whoever, or a gal. They die, and there's all of this praise and adoration poured upon these people for being how many years of public service they had, and they were they're great patriots and whatever. And in many of these cases, I have had these relationships where you say the guy was a freaking criminal. He was a criminal, and sold influence, bought influence, did things. I'm talking killing people, and I don't know that about McCain. In some of these cases, we're talking about killing people.
Well, there's a whole history with the Clintons on this, going back to Arkansas.
This is just, and people say, well, how do you know that? Because I know people. I know people that did it. I know people that was their job, was to go in there and do some of that dirty stuff. And the stories. One of these guys, I didn't know him. I got a friend that knew him. One of these guys pushed his own mother down the stairs and killed her to get the life insurance money. These people are reprehensible human beings. Now,
money is a motivator for a lot of stuff that happens.
They're sociopaths, and they operate as operatives. They do stuff, and they're available to hire, and they're just a lot of times they're just nasty people. But my point here is that I guess I've got a couple of points. One of the things that I want to point out is that you think that these people are criminal masterminds on the order of some novel or some Marvel comic genius of 200 IQ or something like that. Most of these people aren't.
Like the Spider-Man type thing. Who is the guy behind it? I forget. What was the actor's name? But yeah, they're not these like super criminal, or James Bond, the super masterminds that are just ultra brilliant.
Well, I guess my point is the guy that plays Goldfinger, that these incredible genius, people. I'm talking about the senators, the congressional people. Senators a little more than congressional people, because congressional people come and go more. Those senators are permanent fixtures. You can't get them out of office. It's really hard. The people who end up being president, stuff like that, a lot of them. Yeah. These folks aren't that smart. I hate to say this. I'm just a regular kind of Joe that sticks his nose in places. But I've had conversations with some of these people. Sat in my front yard and had a conversation with a U.S. senator from my area one day for 40 minutes. And I walked away thinking, that is the dumbest woman I ever talked to. Is
that the gal that wears the sneakers?
No, the other one.
Oh.
Maria Cantwell.
Maria can't do it.
I walked away, and she's been on high-tech companies and all kinds of, where they say, well, she's got to be really, really smart. She's done this and this and got this education. I said, I don't know what to tell you. I saw no evidence of it. I sat and had a conversation, and the whole time she was going, I'll have to think about that. Gee,
Don't stop and think. My gosh.
Never thought about that. I'm talking about basic concepts like small business being the economic backbone of the country. Really?
They don't know, because most of them haven't lived real life. That's why a guy like Ted Kennedy just incensed me, because this guy is so detached from everyday reality, but you're trying to tell me what me as an average American needs? You have no clue, Ted. I'm sorry. You have no clue. You're ultra rich. Nancy Pelosi, you're worth $110 million. You have no clue what the American people need. You know what?
And the thing is, a lot of times these people, they're groomed, and they came up through the system. They decided they wanted to go into politics. Mm-hmm. And they went to law school. A lot of times they were mediocre students. They just wanted to get through law school, have that on their button, so that they could get into politics. They're charismatic opportunists, like I said. And to a large degree, many of them were picked because of the image that they represent.
Mhm.
So what they'll do is they'll go through the system, and there's a couple of really loudmouth people out there right now that are exactly this situation. They literally go through and they find these people who have a certain look or a certain name or a certain image that they want, that the party wants to promote. And then these people become the face and they get put in position. Obviously, they're usually good talkers. Some of them, one of them in particular that's out there right now that just about everybody knows about was an actress. They literally ran a casting call and started running these people through until they got the right one and hired her for the part, and now she's elected. And they ran her. This is the concept that somebody doesn't run for office, they run this person for office. The system puts it out there. So specifically talking about the Bidens, because this is hitting the front right now.
Yeah.
And everybody, maybe everybody doesn't know, so I'll say what happened was Hunter Biden. You can come up with your own opinion of this guy, but just read a little bit. The stuff that's public fodder. I'm trying to think of how far I probably can go with this, but it's out there in public. It's a matter of what do they say? This is nobody's secret. This stuff is public
record. It's
public record. Okay. That the guy took up with his dead brother's widow, had some kind of arrangement, some kind of deal with his 14-year-old niece. The widow kicked him out. His wife kicked him out when he took up with the widow. The widow kicked him out when she found him messing with his niece, and the fact that he was with a hooker. He got kicked out of the Navy for being on cocaine. I mean, on and on and on with this guy. I mean, it's like this huge list of deplorable behavior that this guy has, because for 47 years he was a privileged son of a U.S. senator.
Sounds like a lot of the Kennedy family and some of the fallout from there.
Oh, it's unbelievable.
Yeah,
it's unbelievable when you watch this and you think, who is this?
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, they do stupid things, and this, back to my book a little bit. One of the things that I was working with in this book is that if you just pay attention and watch them, this is what investigators do. They kind of follow these guys around and sort of check and peek, because they do really stupid things, like leave a laptop at a repair shop and don't pay for it. Don't pay for the repairs, and then pretty soon the guy flips the thing open. It's got a sticker on there that says Biden. The Biden Foundation or something. He flips this thing open and digs into the hard drive and finds this stuff. And Anthony Weiner's hard drive, again, another complete freaking moron. The thing is, they're so arrogant. They think they can get away with anything.
That guy was a piece of work.
It's incredible. They get these laptops and they've got pictures. They've got they got kitty porn. They've got
Should be loud. That's sad. I mean, that's pathetic. But it's just you don't think you're ever going to get caught with any of this stuff?
No, they don't. They're so arrogant and so narcissistic, whatever, that they think that they can do anything, so they will make a mistake. They do really incredibly stupid, unbelievably stupid things, like keep their emails on an unsecured server in somebody's basement. That is the most moronic, arrogant thing I can even imagine in this day and age. And I'm talking about Hillary Clinton. Though that server was hacked by everybody in the world, they've got everything on it. And the same thing with Biden's laptop. I don't know how much you followed this, but I don't
really. I just don't. Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what happened. He takes this laptop in because he dropped it. He was high and he dropped this thing in some water or some liquid, and spilled beer on it, whatever, I don't know. But anyway, it was liquid damage. He took this into a repair shop,
Mm-hmm.
And there was an $85 bill to clean it or whatever. He never came back for it. And some months later, the repair shop guy says, well, it's mine now. And he flips the thing over, starts digging around, and he finds all of this stuff. I'm talking massive amounts of kiddie porn. I'm hearing some of this, pictures of his 14-year-old niece, him smoking crack. Some of these pictures are out now. Now the stuff with the babies, the stuff with that isn't out because they're not going to publish that stuff. But this repair shop guy sees this stuff and he's thinking, holy shnikes, right? He calls the FBI. They don't follow up on it. He calls the police. They don't follow up on it. Nothing. So finally, he calls Rudy Giuliani's office and reports this thing because he can't get anybody to pay attention to him. Now, is that realistic? I can tell you it's absolutely freaking realistic because I've been in that situation where there was bribery and stuff going on, and I tried to get the newspapers and the media to cover it, but they wouldn't touch it. They didn't want to touch it. They want to talk about some housewife that got screwed out of her PUD bill or something like that. They don't want to talk about a major deal. Very, very rare. That threatens their career because somebody's going to shut them down.
Well, it just goes back to like Hoover's control, the FBI. He went after the stuff. He had I'll call it an inordinate paranoia against communists and Marxists. And they tried, just for instance, so I've read this, I've studied this in history. They tried to go after Martin Luther King, try to accuse him of being a communist. Guess what? The evidence was never there. They couldn't find it. He was convinced he had to be a communist. So it's kind of like one of those things, self-fulfilling. If you're looking for it long enough, you'll find it. But he was so obsessed with communist influence that anybody that possibly could, and he hated Martin Luther King, so tried to paint him as a communist. But I found through my own study and reading that was absolutely untrue. Yeah. There's no foundation to that. But J. Edgar Hoover tried his best to go after him for it. So.
Well, what Giuliani did, from what I understand, is he made 3 or 4 copies of that hard drive, and he finally was able to make arrangements to get the thing out there. Now, hold on just a second, Brad. I'm sorry. I got to let my children.
Guys, thanks for joining us here. We're going to eventually probably talk about the debate that's coming up. We'll get to that before we close out today, but interesting discussion here today for sure. So hold on to your seats for our main guest, the aspiring novelist, Val Campbell. He's back again, guys.
I had to let my dogs out. It never fails. Just about the time I deep into something, they start wandering around. If I don't let them out, they make mischief. So anyway, I'm sure somebody's going to say, well, there's political motivation here. Oh, heck yes. You think that Giuliani didn't want to wait until just before the elections to make some of this stuff coming out, the October surprise? Absolutely. But let's consider the fact that the FBI and the Department of Justice people had their hands on this hard drive months ago. Now, I'm not talking about even the original time when they wouldn't even follow up on it. This was actually taken to them, forced into their, grubby little hands, in December or whatever last year, and they didn't even notify Congress. They sat on it. They don't want nothing to do with this because why? Because it's going to expose the Obama-Biden administration for the corruptocrats that they are. And it's all right there. It's tons of stuff on this moron's laptop. And now the question comes, what does Chucky Schumer want to do? He's out now saying, well, they shouldn't release any more information on this until after the election, praying to God that Biden gets elected because it's going to shut this thing off.
Then it'll go away conveniently.
And here's one of my messages, and then we can we'll use this as a segue, I guess, and then you can talk about the debates because I didn't watch this last one. I heard but I didn't watch. But here's the deal. They hate Trump because he is an existential threat to them. I am not here to apologize for Mr. Trump's personality. I'm here to say that this is the first president in history that has come in from the outside of the system. He's not, he's from their world, but he's not of their world. He figured out, when he was in business, he figured out the system. It's not hard to figure out. Every developer knows the system. He used the system, the politics and the building departments and the laws to his own best interest for his company. That's what business people do. And then he decides to run for office, and I'm not sure that it wasn't I don't know how serious he was about it at first, but then at some point in time, I understand he realized he could win. He could be the president. And now he starts taking this, what back then he started taking that seriously, because he's got the ability, because he's not part of their system. He's not part of their game. He's got the ability to break it up, to expose it. And he kind of gets off on that trip anyway, doesn't he?
Yeah, I'm not as much into that, but I'm not disagreeing with what you said. He is definitely an outsider, when he ran in 2012 or something. This guy's a joke. I mean, what was his show there? Where he says you're fired. I never watched that, but he definitely understands media. He's savvy. Even when he started running as a Republican candidate, I really wondered. I said, he can't be serious. I said, Trump, no way. And I didn't vote for him last time. I didn't. I had some qualms about him. But
Clinton fan, were you?
No, I did not vote for Hillary, and I did not vote for Donald. Okay. I voted third party, as I have most of my adult life. However, I will say now, I am voting for Trump this time. I'll let the cat out of the bag. I just can't see Joe Biden, the Democrats. I just think it just sickens me to think if they're elected. I'm like I said, the world's not over. I'm not going to sell my house or anything like that, but I just don't think they've got a pretty far leftist agenda, particularly if something happens to Joe and Kamala ends up becoming president.
Well, and by the way, did you hear that she was actually named in some of the corruption stuff with the Chinese and all of that? She was part and parcel to this. I didn't even know that until this thing came out. In fact, there's a separate thing. There's an email that came out that's separate from the hard drive thing of Hunter. There's an email that got released that literally outlines who was getting money from foreign government, China, I think, and Kamala Harris was on that she's a pass. So this answered a lot of questions for people who thought, why would they pick her? There's no reason for them to pick her.
There's no political.
Usually what happens is you pick, you're from the East Coast, you pick somebody from Texas because you're trying to influence that vote. They already have California. They don't need Kamala Harris. Why would they pick her? She doesn't poll very well. People don't particularly like her.
Poll her state,
None of that. No, she didn't even do very well in her own state in the primaries and things. So why pick her? Well, it becomes pretty obvious when you find out that she was part of the deal that was getting money. And so there you go. And my, of the 1,020 big concerns that I have about them, it's that these guys have sold their soul. There are foreign governments that have their hooks into these people. They've got the porn stuff on Hunter Biden. He was in Asia playing around with little kids. I mean, purported to these releases from the hard drive. I haven't seen them. Okay, I'm just telling you what was reported on what's on this hard drive.
Yeah.
And when a government has that when China has that kind of a hook into you, and your family's been getting money and you are exposed, they've got your cojones. Now, what is that for the president of the United States to be beholden in that manner to these governments? It's a bad deal. Yeah. So how did you feel about the debate this time?
Well, like I said, I'll be honest. I had watched. This is probably the first this debate before. This is the first time I've watched debates probably ever. I'm just not into that. I'm not into the political theater. I'll just say it what it is. Yeah, Jerry, thanks for the comment, brother. But the first one was, I'll just say it was an embarrassing slugfest. It was very unprofessional. I was just like, you should have given these guys boxing gloves or put them in the octagon or something. It just was very unprofessional, unpresidential. This one, much better so, I think, with the timer and all that. Both of them did much better. There wasn't so much animosity. I think Chris Wallace was terrible. That guy, why he's on Fox News, just like, why do you let a fox in the hen house? I mean, that guy's worthless, just like his dad, Mike Wallace. But in my personal opinion, going back to Dr. John Hipley's class on public relations in 1984, Central Washington University. Thank you. I learned a lot. I learned a lot about media and how it works and how they script things, how they edit, how they make things look. Anyway, the gal that was moderating, the White House correspondent, pretty good, but she seemed to be cutting Trump off, letting Biden talk. I will make these observations. Aside from it was much more amicable. I thought the questions were decent. Somebody that I read, and what I like is reading readers' comments. This was a guy in the Wall Street Journal. I didn't quite pick this up, but he said Biden seemed to lose his, I'll use it, mental focus or acuity after about a minute in. So it's like he probably pumped him up on B12, but he didn't seem to really, he seemed to tail off after a little bit. Who won? It's hard to tell. I think Trump did a better job of explaining what he wanted to do. I think Biden still was everything's Trump's fault. I think that gets old real quick. I mean, coronavirus, Trump didn't start at the economy. That's not Trump's fault. You got to get over it. Leaders take responsibility. What I see Biden and the Democrats doing, they're not taking any responsibility for anything. They're just pointing the finger at Trump and saying, hey, it's all his fault. He caused it. My gosh, you guys only been in office 4 years. Biden's been in office how long again?
47.
Let's see. In less than 4 years, Trump's created all. Anyway, let's get off it. We got to get over the political theater. We got to get real. It went much better. Now, my assessment, talking to our money manager Tuesday, he's not worried. How's the stock market going to play after the election? He's not worried about it historically. And again, you can't always rely on history in the stock market because you got to plan on that your plan's not going to go according to plan. Most of the consensus is that the market's going to do okay. Obviously, there's tech companies that have Biden's green plan. I guess I'll call it the AOC Biden green plan goes into effect. The companies that are in those industries are going to do really well. So I don't think the stock market's going to tank. There was a big runoff in 2000. I think that was an aberration. So everything I'm hearing seems to confirm that regardless of who's in office or who assumes office in 2021, the market should hold up. Interestingly, Wall Street's money is on Biden.
Yeah, well,
so that's kind of what I have to say for it. I say that we got a good chunk in the market, so we're watching this stuff, but I don't think it's going to be a fire sale after the election if Biden wins. But there are some concerns about his leftist agenda because it is largely anti-capitalistic. Most presidents, you could go back to, Bush's, Clinton, even Obama, were fairly pro-capitalistic, even though we may not like some of the stuff they did. But Biden, Kamala Harris, definitely anti-capitalistic. That's going to create some concerns in the market. When you want the mantra, tax the corporations, corporate tax rates could go up. I'll guarantee you middle class income rates, tax rates will go, because guess what, folks? They have to pay for this stuff. And when government talks about investment, it's not you taking money and putting it into a 401k or the stock market. It's using taxpayer dollars to fund the stuff they want. So they changed the terminology, a la or AKA George Orwell 1984. So they're investing in our economy.
Well, and this is there are two thoughts that I'll throw in on this. First off, I think Trump is going to win. I think everybody's going to express shock that once again the polls were wrong. Why do I say this? Because when you look at a Trump rally or a Trump activity, and you look at a Biden activity, Biden has 12 people in circles 20 feet apart. Trump has 20 to 30,000 people standing in cornfields in Iowa. The enthusiasm for a candidate usually beats out the hatred of a candidate. You follow what I'm saying? And, hatred, that doesn't really get you out to vote much, but enthusiasm and the fact that there are untold millions and tens of millions of people in this country who believe very much that the system's broken, and there's only one person that's been able to fight them, who's an existential threat. And it's not even so much that he's the existential threat, but the idea that somebody that wasn't picked by them, either side. There's Republicans hate him just as much as Democrats. I think they're close.
We did happen to watch. There's a couple of people that we follow on YouTube that are pretty good. A couple are pretty funny, but there's a guy, he was interviewing people in California. He's pro-Trump, but why are they voting for him? What's their motivation? And interestingly, a couple of people said the reason they're not really excited about Joe Biden, but because they dislike Trump, they're probably going to vote for Biden. Just like that guy that they showed on black guy that Biden basically didn't answer his question at the town hall. He went all around. He called, what do you want to say, going down rabbit holes, didn't answer the question. The guy was kind of even almost sitting there like, is he ever going to get it? They interviewed him after. He said, even with all that, yeah, he's going to vote for Biden. And you're going, really?
I know. There's quite a bit of that, but there's a couple of things, and I didn't see the last one, but I think it was El Mundo, the big Latino newspaper, did a poll, and they were like 67% Trump, 34% Biden. That's huge if there's a bump in the Latino community, and every indication is that that's the case. The other thing is the black community, the numbers of incarcerations and things like that, and the unemployment numbers way down. I mean, massively down from any previous administration. And those communities are talking. There are people from those communities that are out talking about this. The rapper 50 Cent came out this week in support of Trump. Now, you see a lot of these people supporting Biden, and you expect that. When did you ever see 50 Cent come out and support, or Kanye West or some of these guys coming out supporting Republicans? So this has a significant impact. It doesn't need to be a huge shift. 5 points in either one of those communities is huge. The other thing that I will share that concerns me, you were talking about the market. You're talking about business and economics. For my purposes, rather than going back and thinking about who's winning the election, who doesn't win the election, I think population demographics and what's the term that Isaac Asimov invented? Social science, basically, and I can't remember the term, but I'll think of it. I'll think of it as soon as the show's over.
We'll talk about that next week, okay?
For the last 13 decades, 12 decades, 13 now, at the turn of every decade, there is a collapse. And this time, I believe even worse because it was also an election. That's a weird, connection there.
Yeah.
But we can't get over the fact that here's my prognostication. Here's my prophecy, right? We're going to have a couple of years of recovery, and then we're going to go into another climb. It's as reliable as fall goes into winter goes into spring goes into summer, and fall happens again. It's part of the human psychology, the behavior of us as a species of these cycles. And
it's business cycles. Yeah, there's whole thing business cycles.
This is not, I didn't invent this, but I have studied it intently as a business person.
Right.
The next thing about this, though, there is an event coming, and it's a killer event. And that is that our national debt very soon is going to hit 30 trillion. And it's hitting 30 trillion about 8 years to 10 years sooner than we would have projected a year ago. In 1 year, once this next stimulus, and there is going to be another stimulus, once this is done, the national debt will have grown 40+% in less than a year.
Val, I can't help but laugh because you hear some of these politicians like AOC, people talk about, basically the world as we know it's going to end in 8 to 12 years due to global warming or climate change stuff. And I'm going, just from what you said, it's probably going to end because of the national debt. You missed it. Okay.
Well, and I want to be clear. I'm not going to force this on you. I'm going to be clear about my statement here. I believe that there is a time coming when the United States, as we know it, is going to cease to exist. Now, that's a really radical statement, but every nation in the world basically has ceased to exist at some time, right?
Yep.
Or at least, as you know, it may go on, but it's radically different. It's not the same thing.
Right.
And I see the United States being perilously similar to the Soviet Union. It was debt and the economy, the drag that ate them alive.
Yeah.
They got to the point where they couldn't compete. They couldn't compete with the United States. Their economic engine wasn't strong enough. In our case, our economic engine is tied to the value of the dollar and our power and ability to control interest. We can get away with this debt structure because we're controlling the interest rates through the petrodollar and through our monetary policy.
Yep.
But at 30 to 50 trillion dollars in debt, if that interest rate ever comes back and approaches historical average of about 6%, it's done. It kills the country. And the country, when you get a country like this and the money stops flowing from government, the states and the communities that are completely reliant on that.
Yeah.
They're reliant on the government borrowing money from the future to pay for programs that they have today.
Well, and you look at Val, you brought this up. I'll just, I guess, mention this in passing, but the Fed has lowered the interest rates, right? They're almost, barely above zero.
Sure, yeah.
If you got any money in the bank, you ain't making much money in there, okay? But secondly, heard Fed Chairman Powell talking about the Fed has purchased like $7 billion trillion dollars, I'm sorry, in debt since like March.
Well, the only thing they can do is try and absorb some of that.
The Fed is, again, unelected, unaccountable to anybody, guys. We don't elect for the chairman of the Fed or the presidents of the Federal Reserve banks, yet it controls the monetary policy of the U.S., which is something that's very rarely talked about in discussions, but it is huge, as Val has alluded to here. But you have Fed Chairman Powell saying the Fed has bought $7 trillion in debt.
Well, but here's how this works, and I'm not going to tell you I'm the world's best expert at this, but this roughly how this works. If you feel like you got a problem on your balance sheet, what you want to do is you want to acquire some assets as cheap as you can, because that's going to shore up your balance sheet, right? They bought debt, bought it cheap, repatriated it, if you will, almost. They stuck $7 trillion of asset on their balance sheet.
Yeah. Well, from a business standpoint, we can look at what happened to GE. I've got a lot of respect for Jack Welch, his leader, but basically he made a promise that we're always going to beat the market's prediction of earnings. And they were pulling some accounting gimmicks to beat Wall Street's earnings projections for him for years. And guess what? After he retired as chairman and CEO of GE, they've had some massive problems. Okay.
Well,
you're not beating Wall Street earnings anymore. Okay. So there were some problems there with how they were doing stuff to get the short-term earnings up.
And we need to keep an eye on these things, and we need to understand that the Fed is only interested in the national interest as it relates to their interest. That's a private corporation, folks.
Huge.
It's like the biggest, like I said, these are the guys that can go out and literally buy $7 trillion in debt, or if possible. I didn't see that, but they're what happens to that debt if the interest rates go up? That debt becomes more valuable because now the earning ability on that is greater, and they don't have any problem at all, at least at the current time, loaning the United States money. This is a private company loaning us money to spend on TVs and things. And why? They never expect to get the repayment of the principal.
Yep.
They don't care about that. They want the interest payment. So right now, interest is down, and the federal government primarily is borrowing money like drunken sailors on leave. They can't get enough of it. It's crack cocaine to a politician.
Because it's cheap. Because debt is cheap now. When the interest rates go up, debt is not so cheap. It gets expensive, and you can't make the interest payments are going to be like back to what 1980, 81 when we had 18, 19, 20% interest. That's almost loan sharking.
Well, I think it's important that people understand, and we've been talking about how this works. Yeah. This debt goes into the government. They borrow money from the Fed, they take it in, and they appropriate it out. There's stuff sitting there right now that was borrowed, it's sitting there, hasn't been appropriated even. So then they appropriate it out of the committees, and they tend to appropriate this stuff how it pays them. So the people that are paying them, campaign funds and slush funds and whatever, those are the people who tend to get the appropriations for all this huge federal money. So
pork barrel politics, right? That's making pork barrel politics.
It becomes they're selling their influence. What's the influence? The influence to be able to move the appropriations. So they're pocketing millions upon millions upon millions of dollars. Yep. And in some cases, billions of dollars. They're pocketing this stuff. It siphons off that money. So let's say some big bank gets $100 million from the government. Some politician gets a couple $1 million or $1 million into their campaign fund, or some other thing. Their husband or their son or their daughter, whoever, gets hired on the board of directors for $50,000 a month. However they want to structure it, there's ways they can do it. They're using the ability to borrow from the future and funneling it into their own pockets.
Buying influence is what we call that.
Do you really think they care that someday in the future the interest rate's going to go up and kill this country? No, because they're smart enough to know that when that happens, the United States is going to get, first off, they're probably going to be gone by then in 10 or 15 years. Nancy Pelosi's probably not going to be alive in 15 years. I mean, let's face it. Maybe, but
she won't be Speaker of the House still.
She'll be in her 90s, at that point in time. She didn't care. But, she's setting up her kids and whatever. So the next step of this then becomes that the United States splits up into 6 pieces. Who do you think is going to be politically in control of those? Look at what happened in the Soviet Union. My point is, it doesn't mean that there's not going to be opportunity. Always look for the opportunity. It's always there.
Yep.
People aren't going to die. They'll restructure things. It'll be a disaster. There's going to be tens and tens of millions of people that get hurt in the process. The people who aren't taking care of business now.
Yep.
But there's going to be opportunity, just like when the Soviet Union split up. A lot of the opportunity in Russia ended up being Russian mobs controlling stuff. Right. But in Georgia, it became a big deal, right? We're running late, I know. We've done that 2 weeks in a row, haven't we?
So stay tuned. Next week, we're going to talk about the second chapter of Val's book. We just covered the first one. Chapter 2 next week.
Oh, I don't know. Life's crazy.
We'll come up with some topics, but no, really interesting. But, as you read history and you find out what's going on, you see the influence. You see stuff that our government doesn't behave as we would, I guess, maybe wish it would in a fairy tale world. It doesn't, and it hasn't. And I think we want to make sure, don't be naive about thinking that these people in power have your interests or my interests at heart. They don't directly. If it happens to benefit me or you, great. But the people, you got the Bidens, the Pelosi's, you got the Kennedys, you got people that all made huge money off of the backs of the American people because of their power and influence in public office.
Deacon Jerry's our big fan today. Thanks, buddy. I appreciate it. I'm gonna pop this up. Here's what he says. I just had to show that because I think he's great, and I appreciate you, man. You're tuning in here a lot, and I really value that. Thank you so much.
Yeah. And he's paying us really good to be here too, so we really appreciate that. We're getting paid.
If we could ever figure out how to actually make money on this deal, we'd call ourselves smart guys. But we're just we're just a couple of jokers that use this as our enjoyment for Saturday morning, because we think we've got some things to share and some viewpoints that, whether they want to hear it, we're
not the only ones thinking this. And, it's just some of the stuff that just the questions don't get asked that I would ask, that are just stuff's going on out there, right, guys? It's not just getting made up, but you got to be paying attention that if you really like Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, great, but there's some dirty stuff going on there, and you might hate Trump. And I'm not saying he's completely clean either, because there's dirt on Trump, but the guy's not a career politician. You may say, yeah, he's a dirty businessman. Yeah.
I just got to tell you something, man. I've been a farmer. I'm going to tell you, I'm not going to let a weasel move into my hen house because I hate the rooster. That would be really stupid. Yeah,
and that's kind of what I'm saying. I think Trump's by far the better options. That's why I voted for him this time, because I just don't think the Democrat platform is pathetic. And the people in office, I don't want a guy that's been in office for 47 years. In my mind, he's, like I said, 40 years. You've been useless for 40 years. Kamala Harris, her own people of California didn't want her as the candidate in the primary. And she's extremely leftist. I just can't. She's anti-Constitution. I just don't see her as being, because Joe's not going to make it. I don't think he's going to make it through 4 years. Kamala Harris would be your president. Do you want Kamala Harris as your president? I sure don't.
Or Nancy Pelosi. Kamala Harris might find herself on.
Yeah, she'll bring Pelosi in as her VP, and then we'll have a great time.
I think we ought to start running memes that say Kamala Harris didn't kill herself.
Yeah, I always like the ones where he committed suicide and he was shot in the head twice. It's like
shot twice in the back of the head, sitting on a park bench.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I guess Okay. Okay. Guys, hey, sometimes truth is stranger than fiction. It really is.
Usually is. I love you, buddy. Thanks, man.
Hey, thanks everybody. And we will be in touch. Have a great week.
See you next week.
Bye. All righty. Bye-bye.